What's up, guys? Emmanuel Jones here, and we back at with another video of our NFL over under win totals and our record predictions for the NFL 2023 season. And this time we finished the AFC, and now this time we're in the NFC. We're gonna do the NFC teams for their over under win total. So before I get to my predictions, or give you my over on a win total for the NFC teams, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel and comment down your opinion below to see who do you think's gonna win. Who you think who's gonna have which team's gonna go over or under, or which team's gonna win. So just let me know what you think. So we're gonna get started. So the first team we have is the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals are set for at 5.5 wins this year. And totally, I'm taking the under here because we don't know if Kyler Murray is going to truly be healthy by week 1. Like, who knows? He might be, he might not be. Like, who knows? We're not sure if Kyler Murray is going to play. Now, I feel like the Cardinals could at least look to be one of the worst teams in football because you know, their offensive line is kind of getting older, but it's not as good as it is. But receiving core, totally not good. They may look to trade D-Hop. Yeah, and you know, their running game is not as good. It's not as great. And plus, you know, the defensively, they're totally not going to be great because you lost J.J. Watt, who retired, and then, you know, linebackers, you know, Zaven Collins, Isaiah Simmons. I mean, linebacking group is fine. Defensive line is not good. Corner position stinks because you lost Byron Murphy, and then you also lost Zach Allen on the defensive line. And Buda Baker seemed like he wants to lead the Arizona Cardinals. So it looks like Arizona gonna be dealing with some learning curves because they have a new coach, a new culture, and a new system. So they're gonna be dealing with a lot of new stuff. So I feel like Arizona could look to be one of the worst teams in football this year. So I'm slightly gonna take the under. I'm gonna say the Cardinals win maybe 1, 2, 3 games, or maybe 4. I'd say they win 3 games this year. Like, who knows? I'm gonna put them in last in the division because they don't have no talent on that defense. So I'm gonna say under. All right, next team we have is the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons are set for at 7.5 wins this year. And totally, this is kind of interesting, though, because Atlanta is a team that definitely could surprise some people. Now, we know that Atlanta, you know, is pretty much underrated. They have a good play call in Arthur Smith and a good D coordinator, Dean Pease. I like what Atlanta did this offseason. They definitely improved their receiving core by adding Mac Hollins and Jonnu Smith and Scotty Miller. And you got Kyle Pitts as a stud. Drake London could look to take a big step this year to be a number 1 receiver. Their running game is solid. You got Tyler Algier and then Cordell Patterson. He's getting older, but he may not be the same player. Now, offensive line is not as bad as you think. It's pretty good. Defensively, it's gonna be better though. It's gonna be better than last year because you added some key pieces on there. Like you added Calais Campbell, you added David Ayumada, you added Eddie Goldman, you added Bud Dupree, and then Lorenzo Carter is nice. He's still there, and then the secondary did a nice job. You traded for Okuda, then you added Jesse Bates and Mike Hughes. So it looks like, and AJ Terrell's a stud. So at least, and Casey Hayward may not look to be the same player, so he's getting older, so that's something to watch. So yeah. So the Falcons, you know, they're pretty stacked on defense. I feel like the defense, they did a good job improving their defense and upgrading it and all that. But I'm still concerned about the quarterback position. Like, I'm assuming it will be Desmond Ridder because I don't feel like they won't get Lamar. Even if they get Lamar, I think this team will definitely win like 10 games this year. I'll probably take the over. But since Desmond Ridder is going to be a starter, I'm going to go under here. I'm going to say at least like I say they win at least like 5, 6, or 7 games. I'm going for at least 5 to 7 games because due to their underrated talent. So I'm going to take the under here. Next game. All right, next team we have the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers are set for 7.5 wins. And I'm slightly going to go, this is tricky though, because I think Carolina is a team that could look to draft a quarterback this year. Now, I don't think Matt Corral is going to be the answer though, but we know he's coming back from injury. Andy Dalton, I don't think he will be the answer. Now, the Panthers, they got some talent though on both sides of the ball. Because they added Miles Sanders to replace McCaffrey and Foreman. And then you added some weapons to replace DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. You added Adam Thielen, and you added DJ Chark, and then Terrence Marshall, so awesome. Then you added Hayden Hurst. So the offense is pretty much, they got a lot of depth at wide receiver and their offense. So their offense will be pretty good. And especially, you got Frank Wright, who I like, who's a pretty good underrated coach. And then they also got a good coordinator in Evero. But the offensive line still needs some work. It's not as good, but I think they may look to improve it. Defensively, this is where people are sleeping on. It's pretty underrated. Derek Brown, Brian Burns, Shaq Thompson. Their defensive line is very solid. And then the secondary improved a little bit. You added Von Bell. And then, they got J.C. Horn, C.J. Henderson, Eric Rowe, and Jeremy Chan. So they're defensively, they're pretty much good. So they may look to maybe add another pass rusher and maybe add another linebacker. So maybe they may look to add that. Maybe throughout the draft. But I think Carolina is gonna be better than I think they're gonna be better than I think. But I think this team can definitely win a division and be a playoff team as long as they at least upgrade at quarterback. Which I think it will be Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. If you get one of those guys, I think you upgrade the quarterback position. I think this team will be good, and you upgrade the quarterback position. And I think Carolina is going to be in the range for at least like 7 to 8 wins this year. I'm slightly going to go a little over this time and say Panthers win 7 or 8 games this year. But, yeah, I'm going to go with 7 or 8 wins, so I'm going to take the over here. All right, next team we have the Chicago Bears. The Bears are set for 7.5 wins this year. I don't really agree with this number. So I'm going to take the under here because I'm not sure how good Justin Fields will be. Would he be better than he was last year? Maybe. I expect him to take a leap this year because, he had a down year. But I like what the Bears did on offense. They bolster up the run game, adding Deonta Foreman. And then the receiving core is excellent. You added DJ Moore. And then you got Darnell Mooney, Chase Claypool, and Cole Kmet. That's enough on offense. And then you added Tunyon as well. So they got a lot of depth. So they're offensively, they're going to be much better. The offensive line may need improvement. It's probably going to be better than it was last year because you added Nate Davis in free agency. Defensively, I think they need to improve their defensive line a little bit, but they did improve at linebacker, adding Tremaine Edmonds. That's what I like. Secondary may need improvement. They may look to improve at corner. I mean, the defense is just pretty young. So maybe they may look to add maybe some more players on defense throughout the draft, or maybe an O-line, maybe an offensive line in the draft, because I think they might need another offensive line, and maybe they may add another pass rusher. And I don't think Matt Eberflus is as bad a coach as you think, because I think he can make this team completely better than last year. Giving him credit. So I'm gonna take the under here, and I'm gonna say the Bears win like about 4 to 6 wins this year. So I'm gonna say under. All right, next team we have is the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys are set for at 9.5 wins, and I'm gonna take the over here because I believe the Dallas Cowboys are gonna be much better team than last year. Now I like what the Cowboys did this offseason. You traded for Gilmore. You add another corner by adding Gilmore to the secondary. So I think the secondary will be elite. And you still got Diggs, who's a stud. They may look to add another safety. I don't know. And then, linebacker position is pretty good. You know, you got Tad McKinley, Micah Parsons is a stud, Leighton Vander Esch is a stud. And then you got the defensive line. You got Dante Fowler, DeMarcus Lawrence, who's a stud. And then you got Dorrance Armstrong. So, yeah, so your defense, so the defense is pretty good. I mean, offensive line is solid, but it's getting older. Receiving core is pretty much good. It's pretty good. They added Brandon Cooks to it. I mean, the receiving core will be much better than it was last year because you added Brandon Cooks and you got CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, but you also lost Dalton Schultz. Like, who's gonna replace him? Like, maybe they can replace him in the draft. Like, who knows? And then Ezekiel Elliott, you know, is still pretty good. And now they're looking to bring back Tony Pollard, which that's nice. Dak Prescott, he's okay, but I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback. I think he's a little bit overrated, in my opinion. And then their coaching staff is pretty good, but you got rid of Kellen Moore, which that's a significant loss. You still got Dan Quinn, who's a good defensive coordinator, and Mike McCarthy he's okay, but I think he's a little bit overrated. So I feel like the Cowboys are going to be a good team this year. And they should slightly go over here. I got them going over, and they should slightly win like 10, 11 games this year. But even if they win a division, I wouldn't be shocked. So I got the Cowboys over here. All right, next team we have the Detroit Lions. The Lions are set for at 9 wins this year. And I'm slightly going over here because I believe the Detroit Lions are going to be a good team this year because here's what they did. The Lions barely made the playoffs last year, and they should have. And I believe that this is the year I think Detroit has a chance to do it. But especially they're in the weak NFC North. Because here's what you got. You improved your running game, adding David Montgomery. And then you improved the receiving core, adding Marvin Jones. And then Jameson Williams, you know, he's a good receiver. And then Amon St. Brown is a stud. Maybe may look to improve at tight end. So their receiving core is awesome. Jared Goff, you know, he's okay but not great. But I feel like Jared Goff is just an average quarterback, in my opinion. And then offensive line is pretty good. And defensively is pretty good. Aiden Hutchinson, I want to see him step up his second year. He should have won Defensive Rookie of the Year. He's going to be a stud. They may look to add another pass rusher. Secondary is much improved. They added C.J. Gardner-Johnson. And then you added Mosley and Sutton. And Kirby Joseph's pretty good. So the secondary is pretty good, but they might need to look to improve their linebacker position and add probably another pass rusher along Aiden Hutchinson and Romeo Okwara. So, yeah. So, but I think this is a team. And Dan Campbell, he's a good coach. I mean, I like him as a good coach. He's a good play caller. He's been starting to keep the Lions in games because, he's been starting to make this team more competitive. And plus, they got a good defensive coordinator in Aaron Glenn, which I really like. I feel like he really did a good job with his defense. So, yeah. And then Ben Johnson did a good job with his offense as well. So I believe this coaching staff is pretty good. And I believe this is a team where I think the Lions make the playoffs. And I think they might go first in the division since 1993. So I'm slightly going to go over here and say they win like 9, 10 games or maybe 11, which I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be shocked if they won the division. So I think this is a team. I think the Lions are a team to beat in the NFC North. And I think this is a team that should be back in the playoffs this year. So I'll slightly go over. All right, next team we have the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are set for 7.5 wins this year. And likely, I'm going to go towards the under here because all we know is that Aaron Rodgers is not going to be coming back to Green Bay. But if he does, I think this can be over. So, by the way, I think Green Bay, they didn't make the playoffs last year, but I think they should be better. But I think Green Bay might be better than I think. We don't know how good Jordan Love is going to be. I mean, Jordan Love, we don't really know how good. We don't really know how good he's going to be because he hasn't started yet. This will be his first time starting, but I know this is his third. I think this is his fourth year in the league, I believe. I don't really know. I think this is his fourth year in the league because he hasn't. But I think it will be his first time starting. But I don't really know how good he's going to be. We're going to see. And then running game is solid. Aaron Jones is a stud. A.J. Dillon's a stud. Receiving core, it's not that good. I mean, Christian Watson may look to turn into a number one receiver. We expect him to break out a second year. Romeo Dobbs is a good receiver. I think he may look to be number 2. So their offense is pretty young. And then offensive line is solid. And then defensively, their defensive line is pretty good. Kenny Clark is a stud. Devontae Wyatt is pretty good. DeAndre Campbell's a stud. Rashawn Gary is a stud. Preston Smith's a stud. Quay Walker's pretty good. They added Eric Wilson. So which that's nice. So their defensive line is pretty stacked. And then secondary is awesome. Because Alexander's a stud. Eric Stokes may look to be a stud. Darnell Savage is a stud. And I feel like Rasul Douglas could be a stud. So, yeah, so I think the Packers secondary is pretty good, but their special teams is not as good. But their defensive coordinator was definitely not as good last year. So he was okay, but not great. And then you got Matt LaFleur, who's a good play caller. So, yeah. So I believe that the Packers, I'm slightly going to go under here because I don't really think they're going to be the same without Aaron Rodgers. Even with Aaron Rodgers, they still had a rough season. But I think they will have another rough season again. So I'm going to say I'm slightly going to go under here and say the Packers win 6-7 games this year. So, yeah. So I'm going to take the under here. Next team we have is the LA Rams. The Rams are set for 7.5 wins. And totally, I'm going to take the under here because, who knows if Matthew Stafford is going to be healthy? I mean, Matthew is kind of concerning that he's still there because I'm not sure about his health. And I don't know if he's going to be the same player like he was a couple years ago. Because here's the thing. Now, the Rams' offense could be atrocious. Now, their offensively, they're probably okay, but not great. But if they get rid of Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson, their receiving core will definitely be bad. But it's not as good, but they might look to improve that. Allen Robinson could be on his way out. Cam Akers is still a good running back. So they may look to add another receiver throughout the draft in the mid-rounds. Now, we know they don't got their first-round pick. Now, offensive line is totally not good. Defensively, they just only got Aaron Donald. And outside Aaron Donald, their defensive line is not as good. Secondary is totally not good. You traded Jalen Ramsey away, and then you got rid of Bobby Wagner and Leonard Floyd on their defense. So their defense, their defense will be a lot. So I feel like their defense will be a lot worse than it was a few years ago. It won't be the same as it was. So yeah, so this could be the most overrated defense I ever see in the past couple of years. So yeah, so I feel like I feel like this team is in a rebuilding mode. So they're gonna have to work to get more draft picks. The Rams, they still got Sean McVay, who's a good offensive play caller. And then Matthew Stafford, he's a good quarterback, but he's still top 10. And then you got Aaron Donald. I mean, they got some good players though, but I feel like this is a team where I think the Rams will have to have another rough season. And I feel like they're not going to be good enough to make the playoffs. And they're not bad enough for a top pick. So I'm going to say slightly go under here and say the Rams win like 4 to 5 games this year. And maybe come in third in the division. So yeah, I'm slightly taking the under. The next team we have is the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings are set for 8.5 wins this year. I'm going to take the under here because I just don't really know how good the Vikings are going to be. Now, there are questions about Kirk Cousins, not being on the team. Now, their offense could definitely be a little bit worse than it was last year. But because Dalvin Cook, they might look to let him go. They let go of Adam Thielen due to cap space. So their receiving core is probably going to be a lot worse than last year, Justin Jefferson's a stud. TJ Hawkinson's pretty good. They may look to add a number 2 receiver throughout the draft. Maybe they look to replace Thielen. Maybe they look to replace Cook if he leaves. Like, who knows? Offensive line is solid, but not great. Defensively, they're pretty good, but not great. But I think they did make some moves. They added Dean Lowry and Marcus Davenport to the defensive line. Linebacking position is pretty good. Daniil Hunter is a stud. Zadarius Smith is a stud. Jordan Hicks is pretty good. So their defensive line is still pretty good. And then secondary, it might be a lot worse than it was last year, but you added Byron Murphy, which that's pretty awesome. Harrison Smith is pretty good. He's getting older. So, yeah. And also, the Vikings did actually add a defensive coordinator in Brian Flores, which that's pretty nice. Maybe the Vikings may look to add more throughout the draft or maybe through free agency because we know free agency had passed. And maybe they may look to Kevin O'Connell entering his second year as a head coach. I think he's an excellent coach. He found a way to take this team to the playoffs. So yeah, I think the Vikings, I think they're gonna take a little bit of a step back this year. So I'm probably gonna say under here, and I'm gonna say the Vikings win like 8 games, maybe 7 or 8 games this year. So I don't think they're gonna be a playoff team this year. Especially they're in a weak NFC North, especially with Aaron Rodgers not in that division. I feel like they could give Minnesota a chance or Detroit a chance to win that division. So I'm taking under here. It's hard to say, but I'm going under. All right, next team we have the New Orleans Saints. The Saints are set for 9.5 wins, but I'm gonna slightly go under here because I just kind of really feel like the Saints are kind of a little bit overrated. I feel like they're going to be much better than it was last year. You upgrade the quarterback position by adding Derek Carr, which that's nice. Alvin Kamara's a stud. You added Jamal Williams, so their running game is going to be solid. Receiving core is pretty good. Michael Thomas should be back and healthy. Chris Olave may look to become a stud. They got Taysom Hill at tight end. Then you added Brian Edwards in free agency, which that's nice. Now, offensive line is okay, but not great. They may look to add another old line throughout the draft. Now, defensively, they're getting a little older in key positions like Cameron Jordan, Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu. Like, we can see their defense regress this year because some of their players are getting older. So, yeah. And we don't really know their defense will be the same because they lost a lot of players. They lost a lot of depth on defense. So, yeah. So, maybe they may look to at least improve it throughout the draft. Maybe replace Marcus Davenport and David Ayumaya. So, maybe they may look to at least replace those guys throughout the draft to make this defense a lot better. So, yeah. So, we can see major regression from this team. But I think the Saints might win that division. I feel like with the Saints upgrading the quarterback position, I feel like they have a chance to come in first in the division. Long as Tom Brady is not there, or Lamar Jackson, or Aaron Rodgers, I think this can give the Saints a chance to win the division. It could give the Panthers or Falcons a chance. So I'm probably going to say under here and say the Saints can win like 8 or 9 games this year. Because due for them, in a weak NFC South. So, yeah. So I'm slightly going under here. Next team, we have the New York Giants. The Giants are set for 8.5 wins. Honestly, though, I'm going to take the over here because I think the Giants are the most underrated team we've ever seen. Now, we've seen that the Giants did a good job improving their roster. They retained Daniel Jones, which that's good. And Saquon Barkley's a stud. Receiving core, they added Jamison Crowder, and they added Paris Campbell, and then you brought back Sterling Shepard, and Darius Slayton is pretty nice. They may look to add a number 1 receiver, to help Daniel Jones. They added Darren Waller, which that's nice, which he's a stud. Offensive line is pretty solid. Defensively, they're pretty good. Dexter Lawrence is pretty good. Leonard Williams, linebacker position is good. They got Azila Jorley, Jalen Smith, Kevon Thibodeau. I mean, defensively, their pass rush is awesome. And secondary is solid. Adoree Jackson is pretty good. You added they got Xavier McKinley. So, yeah, maybe they may look at another corner. So, it looks like and then you also got Don Martindale, who's a good defensive coordinator. Like, he keeps the defenses in games. He's good at blitzing. And then you got Brian Daboll, who's a good offensive coach who won Coach of the Year. So, I believe the Giants should be a good team this year. And they definitely could make the playoffs again because they made the playoffs last year. And they definitely won a playoff game, which that's nice. So, I'm slightly going to go over here and say the Giants win like 9-10 games this year. So I'm probably going to say they come third in the division. So yeah, but I still got questions about about the division. But this team could definitely disappoint me this year, but even if they do, I wouldn't be surprised. So I got the Giants at over here. All right, next team we have the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles are set for 10.5 wins this year. And slightly, I'm going to take the over here. I think the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be a much better team like they was last year. Especially, though, they kind of really lost some players on defense. Like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Marcus Epps. They lost some players on defense. But, the linebacker position is good with Jacoby Dean, and Hassan Reddick. And then, they got some more players like Jordan Davis, Derek Barnett, Fletcher Cox. and then, Josh Sweat. So I believe the defensive line is pretty talented. Then maybe they may look to add more throughout the draft. Secondary is pretty solid. They lost C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who was a game changer, but you did replace him with Terrell Edmonds. Corner position is pretty good. You retained it. Darius Slay's a stud. James Bradbury's a stud. Avonte Maddox is pretty good. You added Greedy Williams. So the defense is pretty talented. And the offense has talent like A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. That's a good duo at wide receiver. Offensive line is pretty strong. They brought back Jason Kelce, which that's nice. And you got pretty good at tight end too. But their running game could be but the thing is that their running game could definitely be a little bit worse because you lost Miles Sanders. Maybe you could look to add throughout the draft, or maybe you could at least trade for one. But Jalen Hurts, he's a stud at quarterback, but he's starting to get consistent as a passer, and he's good as a runner. And their coaching staff is excellent though. But actually, we don't really know if the Eagles are going to be the same without those guys like Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, because those guys are definitely significant losses. So I'm saying the Eagles will still be a good team, but I'll slightly go over here and say the Eagles win 10 or 11 games, and I think they could definitely have a chance to at least come in first in the division. So I'll take the over here. Next team, we have the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers are set for 11.5 wins this year. Slightly, I'm not sure if Brock Purdy is going to play this year, but even if he plays this year, I don't think it matters though. But I'm going to slightly go under a little bit because I'm not sure if Brock Purdy is going to play this year, because he announced it yesterday saying that he's not sure if he's going to play this year. But even if he doesn't play this year, I feel like this NFC West team could definitely be weak. So, Trey Lance could be the starter, or either Sam Darnold, who knows. Even if they get Aaron Rodgers, okay, I'll slightly go over here. Even if they get Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, or Tom Brady, okay, I'll slightly go over here. But given that the Niners, they have questions at quarterback, and the reason why I'm taking the under is because I think the Niners have questions at quarterback. Now, running game is pretty good. CMC's a stud. Elijah Mitchell's pretty good. Kyle Juszczyk's a good. And then the receiving core is good because you got, Deebo Samuel's a stud. George Kittle's a stud. Brandon Ayuk is awesome. Ray McLeod is pretty good. So, offensively, their receiving core is pretty good. Offensive line is totally the best in football. Defensively, they're elite. Nick Bosa's a stud. Eric Armstead's a stud. And then you also added Javon Hargrave, which that's nice. Then Kinlaw is pretty good. Then Greenlaw and Warner, which their linebacker position is good. Secondary is pretty solid. Hufanga looks like he's going to be a stud. They added Isaiah Oliver. Travarius Ward, maybe he's a good number one corner. I don't know. Maybe they may look to add another one throughout the draft. I don't know. So the San Francisco 49ers, they're loaded there. Their coaching staff is awesome. Kyle Shanahan's a good offensive play caller, he's a coach I really like, who I think is the best coach in football. Defensive line, their defensive coach, you got added. You lost D'Amico Ryans and you replaced him with Steve Wilson. We know Kyle Shanahan's good at replacing defensive coordinators, so I still think the defense will be better, and the offense should be a lot better. And I hope Brock Purdy can stay healthy so he can play. And I think the Niners should be back in the playoffs again. And I think they should be able to come first in the division. So I'll slightly go under here and say the Niners win 11 games this year. That's what I'll say. I'll slightly go under. Next team, we have Seattle Seahawks. Seattle is set for at 8.5 wins. Slightly, I'm taking over here because I think some people are kind of sleeping on this team a little bit, but now I'm not. Now, I feel like Seattle is a team that is pretty much underrated. Kenneth Walker, he may look to be a stud. Their receiving core is excellent. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett is a good combo. Noah Fant is pretty good at tight end. Noah Fant is excellent. So their offense is pretty good. Offensive line may need some work. And defensively, they did a good job improving their defensive line. They brought back Bob. They brought in Devin Bush, and they brought back Bobby Wagner, which that's nice. So linebacking position is pretty good. They added Jerron Reed to the defensive line, which that's awesome. They may look to add more throughout the draft. Corner position is pretty good. Tariq Woolen, I expect to at least step up his second year. I feel like he may look to turn in a number one corner. Safety position is good. Quadra Diggs is pretty good. Jamal Adams, he should look to come back from injury. He should be looking to come back. He wasn't healthy last year. So I expect the Seahawks, especially Pete Carroll, he's a good defensive coach. He does a good job with his defense. So, and also you did a good job retaining Geno Smith, which that's good. That guy won comeback player of the year. I expect him to be a stud at quarterback. But I think Geno Smith is a bridge quarterback. In my opinion, I think he's a bridge quarterback. I don't really think he's like a top 10 quarterback. Maybe he could look to be top 10 next offseason. So I think the Seahawks are the most underrated team ever, and I expect them to go over. And so, yeah, I expect them to win at least like 9 games this year. And I think they could definitely make a run to the playoffs again. So I'm going to say the Seahawks go over here and win like 9 games. All right, next team we have is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers are set for at 6.5 wins. Slightly, I'm going to take the under here because here's the thing. Tom Brady is gone, and then you added Baker Mayfield to replace him. And then the thing is that you got rid of Byron Leftwich, which that's good. And you got Todd Bowles, who's a head coach, which he's a good defense coordinator, but not a good head coach. You got rid of Leonard Fournette, which that's pretty good. You replaced him with Chase Edmonds. And then the receiving core is pretty good. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin's a stud, but I don't know if they're the same player. So, yeah, and Julio Jones, he's on his way out. And Russell Gage is a really good number 3 receiver. So the Bucs are kind of stacked on offense. Now, their offensive line may not be as good as it used to be, though. But, they got rid of Donovan Smith, which that's good. And defensively, they're okay, but not great. We don't know if Akeem Hicks is going to be back, but Vita Vea is awesome. Shaquille Barrett should come back good and be healthy. But they did a good job retaining most of their players, like Levante Davis and Jamel Dean. And then Carlton Davis is still there, Antoine Winfield. And Devin White, we don't know if he's going to be there because he requests a trade. I'm assuming he will be out on his way out. I don't know. So I feel like the Bucs defense could be a lot worse than last year. But they do have some talent, though, a little bit. So I'm going to slightly go under here and say the Bucs win like 3 to 4 or 5 games this year. Or maybe 6. So, yeah. So I'm going to say the Bucs at least win like 3, 4, or 5 games this year. Or maybe 6. So, yeah, because I don't really just believe in the quarterback position. And I just don't believe in their coaching as well. So I'm slightly going to go under here and say the Bucs will win like 3, 4, or 5 games this year. And I think they're going to miss the playoffs again for the second straight season. All right, next team we have is the Washington Commanders. The Commanders are set for at 7.5 wins. Basically, I'm going to take the under here because I just really don't believe in the quarterback position right now. Like, who's going to be the starter? Is it going to be Jacoby Brissett or Sam Howell? Well, who knows? But if they get like a Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, or they brought back Tom Brady, okay, this team can definitely go over here and maybe like be a playoff team. But you know what? They added an offensive coordinator. They got rid of their offensive coordinator, and Scott Turner, and you replace him with Eric Bieniemy, which that's good. Which their offensive scheme will be a lot better. They got some talent here at wide receiver. Terry McLaurin's a stud. Jahan Dawson may look to be a good number 2. They got Brown, and they got Curtis Samuel and Logan Thomas and Antonio Givens and Brian Robinson. So they got some talent on offense. Offensive line may need some work. Defensive line is pretty talented. Their defensive front is good. Linebacker position, they need to improve that. Their secondary, it's not as good. They may look to at least improve at corner. So, yeah. And I feel like Ron Rivera could be a little bit under the heat now. I feel like their organization is bad. And I don't really know if Ron Rivera is that good of a coach. I mean, I think they're gonna move on from him after this season. So after the 2023 season. So yeah. So given that the Commanders don't know who their starting quarterback is gonna be, I'm probably gonna take the under here and say they win like 5 to 7 games this year. At least 5, 6, or 7 games this year. And I'm gonna put them in last in the division. But if they get it like a mobile quarterback, I think they'll probably come in like 3rd or 2nd or 1st in the division. So yeah. So I'm gonna slightly go under here. Well, all right, guys. Those are all of my NFC win total. Those are all my record predictions for the NFC over/under win totals for the 2023 NFL season. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. And don't forget, if you disagree with me, just let me know in the comments down below what you think. Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think I'm an idiot? Do you think I'm crazy? Just let me know what you think in the comments down below. With this email, Jones from The Big Fan. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys later. Peace.